at the NFL Scouting Combine. I'm Tatum Everett alongside NFL Network's Tom Pelissero. We meet here in Indianapolis, even though we all call Minneapolis home. And just recently, your report on the Kirk Cousins contract deal or what's going on with that situation came out. And it's very interesting. You said short-term extension not desirable. Is that what you're hearing?
I think that what I said in that TV segment may have been slightly misinterpreted here.
Okay.
I would say there's several different directions that this could go. You could reach a long-term extension with Kirk Cousins. I know that Kirk's goals, as he said many times, are bring a Super Bowl to Minnesota. There's also the possibility you could do a shorter-term extension. I don't think that another one-year deal like they did a year ago really makes sense at this stage. The other option is he plays it out, makes $30 million this year, and then you're in a situation where you potentially have a reboot at the position in 2024 because a third franchise tag would be an astronomical price. So there's absolutely some decisions that need to be made here. And, you know, I know Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is always going to be looking at every option, including at the quarterback position here. You're looking at future draft classes. You're looking at your alternatives here. What I do know is Kirk Cousins, the Vikings won 13 games with Kirk Cousins as their quarterback in 2022. Kwesi said it today that he's above the line in terms of can you win with him. It's a matter of at what level do you want to commit to him? How long do you envision him being around? If it's not a long-term type of a situation, then potentially this is one where he's going to play it out.
You mentioned Kwesi Adofo-Mensah now in his second year. He's back at this combine where we all really got to know him so well the first time. Having a year under his belt, what do you expect him to do in the draft? Do we know his tendencies yet?
Well, his tendencies are he'll do anything if he thinks it's the right thing to do. I mean, last year he traded down with the division rival to move back. Obviously ends up with Lewis Seen, who it sounds like everything's moving in a positive direction in terms of him coming back from a pretty severe injury. But, you know, moving up and back and making trades, even if they are within the division, it's not anything that he's scared about here. I think that, you know, one of the things you have to look at from a macro perspective on this roster is, yes, you were a 13-win team a year ago, but you've also got some of those older, more expensive players on the roster here. So to what degree is this the pivot point here? You've got to do some things to get your salary cap in the right place here. There's always, once you're talking about players who are into their mid-30s, even if they've been cornerstone types of players here, there's a certain point at which you can't pay them that top dollar anymore. So there's a lot of different things that you have to look at here. I think that it's wide open in terms of what positions you could draft here. Now, if you take a receiver in the first round, I think that would surprise plenty of people here. Kevin O'Connell also is not going to turn down the opportunity
not at all.
To add a wide receiver. You would think at tight end they're probably set just based upon the trade they made last year with T.J. Hawkinson and wanting to lock him up. But you know, there's a lot of different levels at which you could use help, again, on a team that had a lot of success last year.
You are Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Put yourself in his shoes for a second. And with all of the needs that the Vikings have, what's the best case scenario at pick number 23?
It's a tough question, and I'm not in his shoes because he's a lot smarter than I am. I think that, you know, obviously just a good football player sliding to you is a big part of this. You know, this is a draft where, just from talking to executives and scouts around the league who have really studied these guys, you know, you've obviously got some of the quarterbacks who are going to go early. Bryce Young should come off the board really early here. So should C.J. Stroud, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, depending how he works out here in Indianapolis, is a guy who could really end up rising up the board here. But, you know, you've got a frontline running back in Bijan Robinson. He's probably long gone before number 23. Wide receivers, there's a lot of variance in terms of the grades. You know, is it Zay Flowers from Boston College, who's the first one off the board? Is it the Ohio State receiver? Is it the TCU receiver? You know, you don't, in other words, there's not a great deal of clarity. You don't even have those offensive linemen, those offensive tackles who you're convinced. So Skoronski will probably go high, but, you know, taking somebody in the top 5, all of which is to say a lot of different directions this could go. There is depth at receiver. There is depth at corner. You're just hoping, you know, the best possible guy ends up dropping in your lap and you get value, because that's the biggest thing we know about Kwesi is whether it is trading with a division rival, whether it's what you're doing with your own roster, free agents, you're looking to find hidden value in different places. And so getting the best football player possible, there's not a lot of positions where I'd say there's no way they draft there.
I love to hear that. I think the wide receiver would be a very shocking pick, but I wouldn't put it past them as well. I mean, and it's such a debate about whether it's positional need versus value, especially at pick 23.
Right, and I think that I'm not totally privy to how the Vikings break up their board, but in essence, you're trying to place value on every player. Where would we be comfortable taking this player? Teams, by and large, don't have 32 first-round grades or 31 this year. It's not even close to that. There's a lot of years where it's 15, 18, maybe 20 guys. So they're right on that threshold where you feel like you're getting a second-round player if you sit at number 23. Then either we're trying to move up and get somebody who's a true, legit difference maker, first-round type of guy, or we're trying to do what they did last year and moving back. I mean, last year was a perfect example of how the draft broke. There were really good receivers, but you're paying Adam Thielen, and you got Justin Jefferson, and you got KJ Osborne and some up-and-coming guys. Did that really feel like the right thing to do? They could have drafted Jameson Williams, and maybe he'd be the guy who steps in as a difference maker for him this year. Instead, they'll face the Lions twice a year, and we'll find out how good he is here.
Yeah.
But you're just hoping that the board breaks your way. Maybe somebody slides to you. If not, you either, like I said, go up and get that one guy who's hanging out at the top of the board, or you try to move back.
One last question before I let you go. In that same report that you did about Kirk Cousins, a little sprinkled nugget there at the end about Danielle Hunter and how it's ideally they would like to an extension is ideal for them. I know there has been much debate about this defense and who would fit into Brian Flores' scheme. How do you think Danielle Hunter could fit into that?
Danielle Hunter can fit in virtually anything. I don't know that last year's scheme was necessarily the best fit for him. You know, there were times where he was dropping and he was learning how to play out of a two-point stance. It's different than what we've seen Danielle do through the years here. Brian Flores' background is in New England. New England is not a scheme defense. It is a game plan defense. It's about adapting. And that was a big thing for Kevin O'Connell last year, too, because I know that there was some frustration about just the lack of designed pressures. Just, I don't want to say lack of creativity, but you weren't proactively trying to heat up the opposing quarterback. Now this is going to be a different type of a scheme. Danielle Hunter is still 28, I believe. He came back healthy last year, had another double-digit sack season. Those guys at that position can produce well into their 30s. There's some other contracts around the league that may dictate where the numbers end up going on a Hunter extension, but it's a unique situation here because last year the Vikings moved up a bunch of money in Hunter's contract into 2022 to pay him fairly. Now he's on the books for like $5.5 million this season. So while they want to work out an extension, that's the goal. You're also in a position where, hey, if the player and the agent don't agree to the extension, you can kind of sit on it for a while and wait because you have him under contract here. That one might take a while.
Yep.
I don't think that's something that's going to happen in the coming weeks, just like I don't think a big money Justin Jefferson extension happens anytime soon because they really haven't gotten started there. But at some point here, they'd like to extend both those guys, even though it feels like Danielle's been around forever. He came in the league at like age 20.
I know. It really, he feels like such a veteran, but you're looking at his...
He is. I mean, he's been a 2015 draft, I want to say. And he was a third-round pick and developed into a perennial Pro Bowler.
Exactly.
He obviously, 2021 was ruined by the injuries, but he came back strong last year, again, in a scheme that maybe was not necessarily the best for him. Brian Flores will find ways to unleash Danielle Hunter. I would believe that he's going to be on the roster. It's a matter of, are they able to work something out that makes sense for all parties?
Well, I know Vikings fans love to hear that. Unleash Danielle Hunter. Thank you so much, NFL Network's Tom Pelissero. You can watch the NFL Network's live coverage from the Scouting Combine March 2nd through the 5th.